I was just watching this video and I realized also what I want to add to this. Remember what I said? What was I saying? The 84 elements of the salt, the fractal, how what gives us energy in the food, and what means that a food is giving us energy and light and health is the minerals in the food, and of course water, liquid, and the water in the food. And then how it's structured. So how many minerals are there and how they are structured. If they are structured in their natural way, and that doesn't just mean that you grow a food natural, that a food is grown in soil. For example, if you it depends on how the nature is that the food grows in, how much life force, how much light is held in the surroundings, in the environment, in the vibration of the environment. And that all will go into the food. So how much chi, how much life, I don't like the word in the explanation for chi, life force, even though it's used life force. But as I mentioned before, this is power, light is power, this is force. Force is all, power just is. Power is, it's what life is. And then force comes through the ego, through what we call the ego, through the illusion of separation. When I'm in the illusion that I am separate, and when I am so much when I'm so much fear-based and driven by fear, to the point of that my Merkaba is, I'm not going to say but that a being's Merkaba is fallen. Then, and this of course is the principle always, that this is the great picture, this is the big pan of the scope, this is the biggest scope. But as life is fractal, as above so below, this is going on, this ascension, descension, ascension is going on all the time. But then there is this threshold where where death happens. Here, death never happens. And also here, of course, death is the illusion. Here, death seems to be real. And that's why they're so afraid. And that's why they're hell-bent on keeping their forms alive, because they are identified with their forms. And they believe that their form is separate from all forms, and they don't have a way to keep their forms alive other than to take the light from other forms. Yeah. So in a way, we do this in a tiniest scale. When we eat food, we take in the light from other forms, and then the light of the food comes into our body and gives our bodies light. And then there are, I'm going to come back to that in a second. And then there are these foods that are highly fractal, like this Himalayan crystal salt right here. And it gives our bodies energy. And this is table salt, 2 elements fragmented, not in their cluster, not in their natural. So it's kind of like, it's dead. In that sense, it's dead. This is alive. This, when you take table salt, it actually takes away energy. Why? Because it takes energy. Because you see how this is very sharp. This is soft. You see how soft this is? This does no harm. This is actually building blocks, giving life. This has very sharp edges, and when these crystals, these sodium chloride crystals, enter the body, so that would be table salt, what happens is the body has to neutralize the damage that it would cause, because it's like a knife. These sharp edges actually cut into the blood vessels. It cuts into the blood vessels and it rips and tears the membranes. And so there needs to be immediately, for these tears, that's why blood gets thick when we eat a lot of table salt, because there's a lot of these, can't think of the name right now, what the blood creates so that it stops the bleeding. It stops from blood going into where it's not supposed to go, and then that's why the blood gets thick. And so that doesn't happen as much, it does damage control. How does it damage control these sharp crystal squares? It takes cell water out of the cells and packs each and every one of these square crystals into cell water and packs it away. Yeah, so it's the life affirming, the life supporting, and then it's the food, the things we put into our bodies that give us something, support our life, support our body, and give us light. And then there are the foods that are fragmented. They're not fractal, and at some point of not fractal and fragmented, it falls. It's just like this. At some point, it takes from us. It takes our energy away. For example, when you put food in a microwave, that's what happens, definitely. And if you use a lot of chemicals on the, so even if it grows in the dirt, you use a lot of chemicals, it'll also have, you may be eating broccoli and thinking it's healthy, and it's okay, but it doesn't have what it could have. And then, of course, the optimal would be a place with high chi, and here we come again. Chi it's called life force, but I prefer the word life power, because, as I said, life force is already like, it opposes itself. Because force is always taking away from life. Force is always give me, and it's not asking. That's what force is. I mean, it doesn't ask. It forces the life out of something. It says, give me, I want this. And if you don't give it, then it'll take it. It'll take it from you in whichever way or form it can. That's what force is. Whereas power is just, it just gives, because it's infinite, it's infinite. It's coming from the 0 point, infinite energy. That's what true power is light. Okay. Death. Yeah, this is death. And of course, death in reality does not exist. There only exists transformation. Or, in the end, here or here, the same thing happens, except it's an entirely different experience. Yeah, up here, or the emergence and the explosion is ecstatic. That's what, this is ecstasy, expansion. This contraction, and then implosion, forgetting truth, remembering truth. Ever more fear, ever more contraction, ever more love. Ever more relaxation. In the end, we all merge back. The form dissolves again back into no form. Form dissolves again back into no form. This implodes. Now, I don't believe that the implosion, this is another thing that came to me today. I don't believe that the implosion itself, when it happens, so the death of a form, um, because when these forms die, as I said, they don't have, like when we die, and death, when we call death, we mean the soul leaves the body. And that actually only happens, I think, in third dimension, because as a fourth dimension, I don't think we leave our bodies anymore. That's ascension. That's from that point on, we ascend, and just like Jesus Christ, which is one example that is very well known across the earth, that he took his body. The body wasn't there anymore. He took his body. So we take our bodies in ascension, and they just become lighter and lighter and lighter, but we don't leave them. Like in the third dimension, when the soul leaves the soul actually leaves the body. It cannot take the body with it, because the body is too dense. The body has fallen. The schism, or the gap between where that's actually when death happens, is when the gap, well, it's also when the soul is ready, when it says, okay, I've had my experience now, I'm going to leave. And by the way, the soul, it's never an accident. Never an accident when the soul leaves the body. That's the volition of the soul. And even if at the level of consciousness of the human being, it's not aware of it. But at the level of consciousness of the soul, it is aware. It is aware. And that's where there is still a difference and a schism between I and my soul. And when this identification with with your human self, with your physical self, and the belief that you have about yourself and your mind, when that identification when the body and the vibration of the soul have too much of a schism, when the soul, when the body has fallen too low in vibration, the symphony of the physical parts of the body with the symphony of the mind, or orchestrated in the mind, because every thought also has a vibration, and every part of the body has a vibration. And that symphony, when that becomes so dense that the soul can't hold it anymore, it cannot hold it anymore, and it also doesn't. At that point, it can't, and it doesn't want to, because it can't do anything with the body. It can't do anything anymore. It cannot gain experience. Now, however, there are some people, they may lie in bed for a very long time. Do you hear that? Bird. I'm not talking about if a body is connected to machines that keeps it alive, but even there, the soul could leave the body, and then the body would die, even if there were machines keeping it alive. However, it may be a challenge. I'm not saying it's not a challenge for the soul if it's very, very, very much asleep. But let's say people where we may think, oh my gosh, they're not attached to machines. They're just kind of like having for years an existence of just lying in bed, being fed, being washed, and all of this. And we think, gosh, couldn't that person already die, for it to be relieved. However, if it doesn't die, it means that that the soul chooses to stay in the body, because it's still growing, it's still processing things that, in a way, that it can only do while it's in this density. Okay. Death. How it is an illusion. Yeah. So I think the worst part of this, because I always say this is these beings that have fallen, like they are at a super dense vibration. They vibrate in so much fear. Their Merkaba is well, it's in the Antichrist. So I can't really say it's very slow, because it's just that the top spin is slow and the bottom spin is faster than the top spin. However, what I am convinced about is that their horror and their hell and the misery that they're in is because they are in this illusion. They're caught in this illusion of separation and fear. But when they die, when their quantum, time's up, or when, this will happen when they cannot force light out of others anymore, when they have no more food source, so to speak, when they don't have anymore this possibility of a source of light from others. And how does that happen is when we do not have, like, when we ascend to fifth, for sure at fifth, and that this is always a matter of consciousness, because we take our bodies with us. So at fifth dimensional consciousness, for sure, maybe also already fourth, but this I'm not for sure of. These are all always these details that I cannot say, like technical pinpoint it down to a certain vibration. But when our consciousness is of 5D, when we are in unity consciousness, there is no way to feed off of us for these entities. They cannot feed off of us anymore. Why? Because they can only find access to us where we interface with them, where we share vibration, where we share frequency with them. And we share frequency with them where we are traumatized, where we have, where we are not conscious at all. We are not conscious at all because we are not conscious of our unconscious, of our subconscious, and all the pains that are in there that we have not yet revisited, that have not resurfaced yet, and we have not remembered yet. And the reason why we have not remembered them yet is because we're not ready yet. We're not ready yet to stand in that emotion, to stand in that same vibration that we have experienced and held down, and remain conscious. But this, of course, happens, as I said, like with the melting of the iceberg. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens bit by bit by bit, that we get triggered, and then a little bit of that trigger, we may have a really bad experience when these emotions are met in the outside. They get everything that's in the subconscious. We will meet, because everything that's in the conscious and the subconscious, that's what we attract. It's the mirror principle. The mirror principle, that as within, so without. We attract what we have inside, and so everything also that's in our unconscious, we will meet that. And every time we meet that, we can stay a little more awake, because we have lost a little more fear, because it's practice. So every time a little bit more of that fear melts, a little bit more of that iceberg melts, and what does it? It melts back into the ocean of consciousness. So you have more consciousness, you have more light, you have more energy, you have more relaxation to meet it the next time, and it goes bit by bit by bit in your own, to your own capacity, in your own timing. Death, yeah. This is resistance. This is resisting death. This is the opposite of resistance, surrender. This is the surrender. This is trusting. This is opening up. This is not trusting. This is fear. This is closing down and being in survival. And they will have panic of death. And so they will try to force the light. Oh yeah, that's what I was saying. So we have these negative vibrations in us, and this is, you know, what we have in our subconscious. If it vibrates at a fallen Merkaba spin velocity and ratio of rotation, if it is so unconscious that we are not aware of it, it's like we fragmented it from we compartmentalized our mind, we fragmented it out of our consciousness because it was so painful. It was just so shocking and painful. You know, the more the more impact it had, the more we compartmentalized, we put it away. And this is how the system works for survival. It has to be this way. And then bit by bit we go closer, you know, and only as much as we can handle. Then it goes away again. We get triggered, we have another experience, and then it goes away again. It comes, you know, comes back, and it melts every time. But the part of it that is unconscious, as long as, you know, especially the core is the most unconscious, because that's the most terror in there, the most fear is in there. That has a certain vibration, and as inside, so outside, our light body reflects that. Our light body, there's going to be in our aura, not in the Merkaba, but in our aura. Well, it's represented in the Merkaba by the velocity of spin, and by the spin balance of ratio in the spin, by the code. That's how it's represented. And it's represented in our aura that it has these black holes in our aura, that it has, you know, black holes is there's no light, and the spin is reverse. So if there's a reverse spin, like an antichristic, parasitical, so deep in the unconscious, there's so much fear, yeah, in the unconscious within us, that will be represented as an opposite spin of the aura, of the auric field. And so it also pulls out the light of the auric field. It gets lost in that hole. Okay? And that's where demons then, this is the source. That's a source of light for demons. But how does that go out? How does it leak? How does it leak? It's when we're triggered. When we are triggered, but when we are triggered to a degree that is, again, overwhelming, it's like re-traumatizing. And we fall unconscious again to a certain degree. And then it happens again. And then this hole gets bigger as more of the light body, more of the auric body gets lost into the black hole. Now, that's light. But somehow, even though it's light and it gets really lost, so to speak, through this black hole, and that's the food for the demon or demonic entity, you know. And it all only means fallen, for the fallen entity. It's the food. And, you know, we can see this principle happening even between people. Even between people. You know, there are some people, they will constantly, they will need to be in conflict. It's like they kind of are addicted to conflict. They are addicted to being, you know, that energy. That because that's what feeds their demons. It depends on what is the greater attractor already. You know, what is the greater attractor? What is the greater moving force? or power or force, depending on, are you more moved by force and fear? If you are more fear-based, then you will be more force-oriented. But if you are more love-based, you will have more power. And it is like in the Native American tradition where they say you have a dark wolf and a dark wolf and a light wolf, and which one do you feed? Or you see in many, this has been depicted many times, you have like this demonic entity on one shoulder, and you have a little angel, an angelic entity on the other shoulder. Both are whispering into your ears. Which one do you listen to? What is stronger? And if you're more fear-based, then the demon will have more power over you. That side will have more power over you. And you will be more like a puppet, because if you're more unconscious than conscious, more fear-based, unconscious than conscious. And why is anything in the unconscious anyways? It's because it's fear-based. And of course, this whole principle is a matter of scale. It's a matter of relativity in volume. Always in volume. How much is the volume turned up? Because this principle is happening all the time within us. At this, at this third dimensional level, and maybe into the fourth. But as a fifth, the game changes. And for example, we can tap into that in our dreams. I've tapped into, for example, I've had many dreams where I was experiencing life, and I was in a situation where I would say, okay, this is probably a 4 or 5D experience of life. And it's not that it's boring and no conflict, nothing going on. It's just different. It's different, but it feels so good coming from a third dimensional, being in a third dimensional life, and then diving into having the experience of what it's like being in 5D or 4D. I don't know. I can only relate to what I hear about it, and then how would I describe that, in my dreams. But how it is for example, okay. In one of these dreams, I was there were a lot of people. We were not related, and and we were staying in an old school building. And I don't know why we were staying. And they were these kind of like metal old hospital beds in this old, ugly, actually kind of ugly school building, although it wasn't that ugly, because it was or like an old hospital building as well, but I don't know, linoleum floors, neon lights, not very pretty. And there were like 10 people sleeping in a room. But it was one of the most wonderful dreams I ever had. Because of how we were with each other. So beautiful. So I don't know why we were living there like that, but it was like nobody was against someone else, and that didn't mean we already. It wasn't at the point of telepathy like I've already experienced in other dreams where it was full on telepathic. No, I don't know why this makes me emotional. Oh. But there was no against, There was just like, we're all different. We're all getting to know each other. And you know, there's some people you that are your friends and you really like, and other people, yeah, you don't really like. But there's no dislike either. There's no repulsion or you know, ooh, I don't like that person. Oh. There was maybe, well, that's interesting. You know, okay, uh, you know, not my cup of tea. But there wasn't this like negative judgment. It was like this open, being open and being honest and sharing our experiences with each other. Just this, like, the come from is innocence. The come from is seeing how everyone is innocent, and everyone was at the same come from. And so that's how I would describe, for example, being at the living in the higher dimensions. Yeah. So did I already say? I think one more thing I wanted to say is that I don't believe that when they go, when they die, when they implode, it's not going to be terrible at all. You know, I'm saying this because I truly believe it, because I've had many dreams. You know, I'm showing this because, you know, in 3D, you know, this is how deep we go is into 3D. If we go lower, our Merkabahs fall, and that's why we're going back. We're already going back. We already passed the summit, the zenith, not the summit. We passed the zenith. We are already ascending because we've gone as deep as we can go without falling. Yeah. But there are those that fell. That there is that whole realm of fallen ones, which we have in our modern history. It's like, no, that doesn't exist. For some reason, it's like that doesn't exist. And what that does also is it creates a lot of fear. It creates a lot of fear, and of course, that's what's wanted. It's wanted from these guys, that we are afraid of them, that we don't know them. Because when we really know them, we don't need to be afraid of them. But then what happens then is they cannot dock. You know, they cannot dock, because when we're not afraid of them anymore, at that point, see, when we understand them, we understand this whole principle of fallen. And these are the principles working in every being. The principles of dark and light, of fear and love. And so then we also understand that, and we understand ourselves to that degree as well. We understand our wounds. We understand how we heal these wounds. And we come more and more and more into the embrace of our full self. And when we embrace our wounds, when we can stand in the fear, in our negative emotion, because we have a certain degree of understanding. So when we can feel these negative emotions consciously, that's when they heal. And the healing is when it wakes up to its true self, when remembering happens. Remembering happens, where also forgiveness happens. Now you come into the forgiving instead of the forgetting. So remembering at the same time is forgiving. But remembering doesn't happen that in the sense that you remember what happened from the perspective that's recorded when it happened. The remembering now happens from a higher perspective of everything you've gone through in your life that brought you to that higher perspective, which also creates a more sophisticated, a more capable of holding light, processing light nervous system, and a more capable of understanding a wider scope of consciousness, a wider scope of why things happen and why this happened to you or through you. Because the worst is, I find, not being the victim, but victimizing. I think that's even, for me, that's even harder to forgive yourself than to forgive another. But that's, that's personal to me. So it's all forgiveness. Yeah, then we remember from that more expanded, higher point of view. Then we can hold these feelings like a crying, screaming baby. We can hold them. We can hold ourselves while we are going through this process, but we stay awake, which means we don't completely identify anymore with poor me, or poor them and horrible me, or poor me and horrible them. We come to this acceptance of what happened, this embrace of what happened, because it's a part of life, it's a part of the soul's journey, it's a part of what we signed up for, and it relaxes, and then that part is regained, is remembered. That light now that was dense, that was densified into, suppressed, contracted into the subconscious, now relaxes, and it comes back into spin and back into flow, and that's healing. And that is why they don't want us to know about them. They don't want us to know they exist. Because it is only in the not knowing that we stay in the dark, and that we stay afraid. And that's what keeps them alive. And that's what they're hell-bent on, because they're so afraid of death. Because they think that all they have is their body. They think it's annihilation. They don't know that it's salvation. Their death is salvation. And when they implode, and when these bodies implode, all that's left is their quantum that they weren't aware of, and reemergence into light. And this is perhaps not ecstatic, but it's not painful. Pain is only through their fear of it. That's what their terror of it. That's their pain. And that's how it works with fear anyways. Fear is afraid of fear. Fear is onto itself. Afraid of fear. Afraid of illusion. Let's not go into the picture of the body is afraid of being like the body has a fear, of course. The body has a fear of being damaged, because that's an innate, inbuilt program into the body, so it keeps safe. So the body can has this sense that it'll keep itself safe. Yeah, that's just a very practical kind of fear. But and then the fear of a physical damage that could, and that would be physically painful. But that kind of fear, like for example now I'm sitting here, that kind of fear is a minute part of our life. Usually the body is not afraid of death. Like when we walk across the street, when we go about our lives here, inside or outside, we're not like, oh my God, I could trip, or oh, someone could drive over me, or I could trip while I'm cutting my vegetables and I could fall into my knife somehow. The body has its own intelligence, and it can see, it has also its field of its senses, and it senses when there's danger coming, and that's a whole other type of fear. But all the other fear is all in the mind. It's completely in the mind. And when we get that, and how do we get that? Because it's in the mind, because it's It's driven by this unconscious, these energies, these emotions that we were not able to process, that are not processed yet. So actually, every time our negative emotions are triggered, that we meet them in the outside, that's the golden opportunity to heal. And when we understand that, and we are open to it, we go through life open. That's why Byron Katie says, because I didn't understand why she said that, why it's part of the work process, is that the last thing she wants people to say, or the last part of the process, is, I'm looking forward to it. You know, to everything that you're afraid of, that you don't want to happen, and then the last thing you say is, I'm looking forward to it. And that's when you really got it. If you can say that, I'm looking forward to, you know, if negative emotion gets triggered, or, you know, negative emotion, you know, so that's anger, fear. Anyways, it's all based on fear. That gets triggered, and of course it gets triggered through a situation. But the situation is there reflecting that part of ourselves that wants to be remembered, that is in the unconscious, that is not remembered yet. So it happens for our healing. And once we understand that, because the thing is, once we receive the gift of the re-triggering, and we come to it from this understanding, from a deeper understanding, from the perspective of the soul, then the healing happens very quickly and very powerfully, and the situation instantly shifts and changes when we see it from this perspective. That's the thing. In ways that from the other perspective, from the egoic perspective, the identified with the story perspective, entertaining the story perspective in which you are the victim, you cannot see it, and you're like, how is this supposed to be good for me? It's a whole other dimension. It's a whole other perspective, literally in another dimension, null point of view. Okay, for now.